Hello and welcome back to our 365 Days with Jesus, also known as Reading the Bible in a Year Challenge. My name is Yvette Andino, and I'm glad to be back. Today is our last day for this week, and we are up to our April 3rd, 2021 reading. And the assigned Bible reading chapters is 2nd Samuel, chapters 19 and 20. So thank you so much for joining us. And now let's begin. So to continue with yesterday's story with David, his son, now things are starting to advance. So in the book of 2nd Samuel, chapter 19, it is divided in two sections. The first section is Joab reproves, rebukes, or criticizes David's lament. And the last part is David is restored as king. So the ending is pretty nice. So Joab is rebukes David because he like scolds at him because he's telling him, why are you crying so much? Why are you so depressed that your son died? Your son was evil. Look at all the damage he's done. Look at all those who loved you and helped you to be rescued from your own son. I think he's also trying to pinpoint him, right? Because Joab did help. But he also murdered his own sons. He murdered Absalom, David's son. So it's not a big help because David asked him, don't touch, don't hurt, don't murder my son. So, he's telling him, listen, all the people are going to now be against you if you don't speak nicely, say thank you, like say something nice to the people who has helped you. So, King David, he does go and it says in verse 8, then the king stood and sat at the gate, and they told all the people the king is sitting at the gate, and everyone comes near the king. I just wanna. So there was actually criticism from Israel's troops, or the ones these were specifically the troops that Absalom had on his side. And it said, the king rescued us from the hands of our enemies, verse 9, and he saved us from the lands of the Philistines. But now he has fled over out of the land from Absalom. And Absalom, whom we anointed over us, has died in battle. So now why are you leaders doing nothing, bringing back David, King David? So then King David sent word to, his two, the three or the four priest friends he has. So Zadok and to Abiathar, the priests. He's like, hey, tell all the elders or the leaders of Judah, were you the last to bring the king back in Jerusalem, since the word of all Israel has come to the king and to his house? You are my brothers, you're like my relatives, you're my tribe, you're my bone and my flesh. Why are you the last to bring back the king? And then he also says to Amasa, who was the commander of Absalom's troops, are you not my bone and flesh? Which is true. Amasa's like a nephew to David, another nephew. May God do so to me more also if you will not be commander of my army from now on in place of Joab. So David takes away that little thorn on his side, Joab, who killed his son and rebuked him, and he's like, you're done. So Amasa will be now the leader. We're going to see later on how Joab copes with that decision. So in this way, he changed the hearts of all the men of Judah as one man. They sent word to king, return you and all your servants, and they return, and they're so now Shimei, remember, he was one that cursed. He was the guy who was going crazy, like not going crazy, but he was kind of crazy cursing at David from our previous readings. So he goes with all his family, and Ziba, Mephibosheth's servant, comes to him as well. And Shimei was like begging David for forgiveness. Please don't kill me. I know I did horrible. I see now God's mercies with you. Like, you've been restored again. Like, he's like, I'm nothing. I'm like this worthless person. Please just don't kill me. And David's like, yes, how much more bloodshed am I going to shed that day? Like, he's still coping with his sons that he promised he wasn't going to kill him. So now was that in concerning to Ziba, the slave that betrayed Mephibosheth and David, he's Mephibosheth's slave. I remember Mephibosheth is the grandson of Saul, Jonathan's son. He comes and he you could see he was kind of like in mourning in a way, like he was grieving, like fasting. He hasn't shaved, his clothes were like kind of dirty, and that's sort of a symbol of something, like when you're waiting for something to happen. So he was waiting for the king's peace and safety, verse 24. So then David asked him, hey, why didn't you come with me, Mephibosheth? Like, I think you could say they became like best friends. Like, imagine, this is his best friend, his dead best friend's son, and that's like for him another person that he loves. And he was taking care of Mephibosheth, and he's like, He's like, you remember Ziba, my servant, remember all the things he horribly said to you? Those are not true. Those are lies. Like, as you know, I'm lame. He says I'm lame, meaning he can't work. He can't walk with his legs. I told him to, saddle me a donkey, which Ziba did have all these things ready. Remember the wine, the fruits, and all the food that he gave him to David. And he's like, and you'll help me ride the donkey and you're gonna take me to David. But he took it, he betrayed me, and he left with the donkey and all the things I gave him without me. And he also slandered or talked bad about me to you. Like, he lied. So then David's like, you know what, let's not keep worrying about this. He's like, you and Ziba divide the land, right? And then Mephibosheth says, like, listen, let him take it all. I'm okay as long as I'm with you. So David's like, okay. That's how you know where Mephibosheth loyalty and love was for King David, not for the servant who was crazy and mean and betrayed him. And you can see how Mephibosheth doesn't is not a materialistic person. He could have been like, okay, I'll divide the land. No, he's like, give it to him all. I just want to be with you, because he knows when he's with the king, he has everything. Just like when we have God in our lives, we have everything. We don't need anything more or less. Um, then you guys remember the tribes I spoke about, how they were helping him and they brought all this food to David and his troops and all those who were with him. So one of them is Barzillai the Gileadite. He's super rich man, and even says he's very wealthy, but he was old, and David kind of wants him in his like court and his team. He's like, no, 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 I have a son for you. I'm getting old. I don't know when is my death date, but it could happen, anytime. He's like, I'm 80 years old. I know I don't have too much time left, but here's my son. He would love to work for you. Please give him what you think is best. And David's like, okay, that's fine. So then David sends him the old man Barzillai to back to the city. So if he said, I want to die in my city with my where my parents' burials are. Um Now, this is where I just want to recap something. The last part of this chapter, if you guys look at verse 40 to verse 43, Judah and Israel. Remember, so Israel's kind of divided into two: the Judah tribe, which is huge, and then the other 10 tribes. Judah, and I think another tribe, and then the other 10 tribes. So now all the men of Israel, right, came to the king and said to him, why have our brothers or relatives, the men from the tribe of Judah, stolen you away and brought the king and his household and all the David's men with him over the Jordan instead of waiting for us to come back with you guys? Then all the men of Judah answered the men of Israel, because the king is he's from the tribe of Judah, where Jesus will be also part of the tribe of Judah. He's our brother. He's like, that's why we were with him. So why are you angry about this? We haven't taken anything special. We haven't had any special food. Like, there was nothing special treatment to them. But the men of Israel, or the 10 tribes of the north, answered the men of Judah, we have 10 tribes shares in the king. Oh, so now David is like a stock market? uh, why did you treat us with contempt and ignore us by rushing ahead? Were we not the first to speak of bringing back our king? But the worst of the men but the words of the men of Judah were harsher. They started talking really mean to each other, were harsher than those of the men of Israel. And this, on the Amplified Bible commentaries, is going to help us transition to the next chapter. The tribal dispute led to the revolt of Sheba. So now let's go to 2 Samuel chapter 20, which is our last chapter of the day. Sheba's revolt. So there's this horrible man. His name is Sheba, the son of Bichri, who's from the tribe of Benjamin. He blew a trumpet to kind of ignite this revolt and says, we have no portion in David, no inheritance in the son of Jesse, every man to his tent, so Israel. And it says, so all the men of Israel deserted David and followed Sheba. Now what's going on? But the men of Judah stay faithfully with their king. What he does is he comes to his palace in Jerusalem. He takes his 10 women, his 10 wives, his concubines. He remember the first time he left his concubines alone to take care of the house. Now he's like, no, they're going to be under bodyguards and provide for them, like, food, meals, whatever. But then, and he just stopped having, intimacy with them. So they were confined and they lived as widows until the day of their death. Now the king told Amasa, who now is his commander of army. Remember, he switched Amasa to Joab from Joab. Summoned the fighting men in 3 days, and he tells Amasa, he delays. So Amasa's like, within 3 days and be here yourself. We get ready to fight. But Amasa, when he goes, he delays longer than the time. So now David has to come consort to Abishai, his other nephew, who is also like a soldier. Now Sheba, is gonna do us more harm. Take your all the soldiers and my servants and pursue him, and because he's gonna start making maybe cities for himself, like besiege the throne. So yeah, all the men. Then Joab's men goes after, Sheba, all the warriors that David had. So, however, something happens. Verse 8, when they were at the gravestone in Gibeon, Amasa came to meet them. Now Joab was wearing his military uniform, and over it he had a belt with a sheath sword stopped around his hips, so the sword is hidden. And he went forward, it fell out. So in the Amplified Commentary, seems this is most likely a feint accident so that Joab could strike Amasa before he was on guard. Remember, I'm sure Joab is not happy that Amasa replaced him, and he can't kill the king, so he's like, I might as well kill the guy that replaced me. That's my thinking that he has. Joab said to Amasa, is it going well with you, my brother? And with his right hand, Joab took hold of Amasa by the beard as if to kiss him in greeting. But Amasa, who had replaced Joab as David's commander, was off guard and not attentive to the sword in Joab's hand, so Joab struck Amasa in the abdomen with his sword, spilling his guts. Ugh, okay, too much detail. So, without another blow, Amasa died. Joab and now Abishai, his brother, pursued Sheba. Now the man that started this whole revolt. And Joab tells, whoever favors Joab is for David. Let's just follow Joab because now Amasa's dead and we have no military and commander in chief. So, however, a lot of the soldiers stopped because, as those who didn't see what happened to Amasa, they started seeing his blood coming from the ground. So now Joab had to hit it. He put like a garment over him, and then they kept going. But some of the soldiers stopped, like, why is our commander Amasa dead? So the revolt is put down. Joab gets into this city where this guy Sheba goes, and he talks to a wise woman. This is verses 16 um, to 22. The wise woman's like, what are you guys doing here? Why are you guys destroying our city? He's like, give us the head of Sheba, we won't destroy the city. So she, since this wise woman probably is a leader in her town, a lot of like some influence, so she's like, I got you, we'll get his head. So they the wise woman and her people, they do kill Sheba, they get his head and give it to Joab, so they didn't destroy the city. And then Joab blows the trumpet, which is his signal, like, hey, the end of the attack is there. Now Joab was now the commander of the entire army of Israel, and Joab goes back to David. Um, and then it just says the ending just shows how there's different like leaders. So, just an example: the king's bodyguards. Benina was the leader of the king's bodyguards. Adoram was over the forced labor slaves. Joseph Hashaphat, the son of Elihu, was the recorder. Shiva was the scribe. So I guess this is who we're reading from. And Zadok and Abiathar were the priests, and also Ira the Jairite was a priest to David. Nice. He has a personal priest. So for tomorrow's reading, Lewis will begin for our Sunday, April 4th, 2021 reading. We're going to see what happens with Joab, with David, and all the other things that are going to come. Then we're going to actually start beginning to read the first book of Kings, and I will be back next week. I hope you guys find this engaging. And now an insight. The moral of the story, I feel like, what can we do if we feel like someone has replaced us, either maybe in a work position, like what happened to Joab? Amasa did replace him in the job, authorized by the king or authorized by your boss, right? Like, what can you do to cope with that? Maybe this is an outlet or a chance for you to start somewhere new, or to keep growing in where you are and do something else. Or how can we overcome our envy or our hatred with our with people? And I think the best way is to pray about them, to pray for them, to genuinely help them, right? And to just pray and ask God for his guidance. Like, hey, I really, you know, not, I don't have these love feelings. I don't really, this person, I feel like betrayed me, like they replaced me. Like, how can I feel better? I definitely think seeking God's guidance and also doing things that'll help make you happy instead of reminding you of that envy. Maybe it's time to go somewhere else, if possible. Maybe you'll start ranking up in your position, right? You got to show you're doing well. Whatever it is, it doesn't have to be work related, but I brought that work example. Maybe it's the start of something new, right? For every ending, there's always a new beginning. So I think Joab should have coped better, right? Maybe help Amasa and then tell David, please at least put me as an assistant, or I'm sorry if, I did rebuke you. I don't know, that's why you replaced me, or whatever reason. Can I really, military is his life, to, he could have done better instead of murdering his cousin. So, yeah. So, God bless everyone and have a great rest of the day and have a happy and blessed week.